What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have the remnants of Tropical Depression Gordon trying to get their act together, to organize and strengthen and do all the things it needs to do. We also have this Central American gyre really starting to ramp up today, and that's going to be the main thing we are going to be watching in terms of the long-term threat. We had Invest 95L, potential tropical cyclone 8, make landfall in North Carolina. It has dissipated, but this is the main threat we're watching over here in Central America, as it is forecasted to enter the Caribbean Sea, strengthen up into a potential hurricane, and then make landfall in Cuba, and then either enter the Gulf Coast or East Coast of the United States. So we're going to have to pay attention to that. But regardless, if you are in Cuba, you need to be on watch. If you're in Jamaica, you should be watching this. If you're in Florida, you should start to take a look at this. The NHC hasn't really tagged anything on this just yet, but I fully expect them to do so in the next day or two. So let's go ahead and look at what we have going on for the National Hurricane Center. We have the remnants of Gordon right here, so let's go ahead and give you an idea of what we're potentially looking at. Disorganized showers and thunderstorms over the central tropical Atlantic are associated with the remnants of Gordon. This disturbance is forecasted to interact with a non-tropical low to its north, while moving north-northeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour. During the next couple of days, environmental conditions could become more conducive for redevelopment later this week, and a tropical depression or storm could form by this weekend while the system moves slowly northward over the central subtropical Atlantic. 40% probability in the next 7 days, 20% in the next 48 hours. That's definitely something we're going to have to pay attention to. And I know a lot of models are forecasting this system to redevelop, and that's something we're going to have to pay attention to as well. But ultimately, let's go ahead and show you what we have going on with tropical depression. Well, not tropical depression, but the remnants of Gordon. Here's what we have going on right here. We have a lot more convection blowing up over here. The center of circulation is right about over here. It is right about over here, according to this area that right here, according to satellite. But we're seeing another area of convection really blowing up over the last few hours. It's definitely something you're going to want to pay attention to. It's not near the center of circulation or anything like that, but when you start seeing trends like this, and if you can start seeing this blow up and become a bit more consistent with how it's going, then you're going to see, okay, things are going to get pretty interesting. You're going to say, okay, things are getting pretty interesting. Let's go ahead and move back to about 120 frames right here, just to kind of give you an idea of what we were looking at. Here's what we were looking at last night. The system was really getting its act together, and then all of a sudden, all the convection really just died right then and there, and you're starting to see a bit of a regeneration right there. But ultimately, the main thing we're looking at is you're not seeing that convection being consistent anymore, and that is kind of in tandem with being a remnant low. So ultimately, it's going to be determinant on what happens next. But regardless, you are starting to see a bit of a resurgence with the convection. You're seeing more blow up over here. Let's see if that will sustain or not, if it'll just be more popcorn convection. We'll have to pay attention to that for you guys right there, so we'll keep close tabs on it. Let's go ahead and also show you what we're looking at in the western Atlantic Ocean. Actually, before I do that, I want to show the area around there. I want to go ahead and look at the water vapor imagery and move this back to, it's at 30 frames right now. Ultimately, here's what we're seeing right now. We are seeing a little bit more of a moist environment. There's not much wind shear going on with it, but the problem is that it didn't get there enough, and it didn't get there in enough time to really sustain Gordon at that current point, because there's been a lot of dry air over here in this part of the Atlantic. Things are getting pretty interesting over there. And ultimately, due to that stable environment, Gordon just finally collapsed last night and into this morning. It was doing a really good job of fighting, doing a really good job of that, but ultimately the stable air mass got the best of it, and now things are starting to ramp up once again. It's going to be determined. You're going to have to see what's going to happen first. You're going to have to watch what's going on. Of course, you are seeing a more moist environment that's being surrounded it thanks to all this convection finally becoming more or less water vapor. So that might help be a better system in the long term. We're going to have to watch that. Let's go ahead and show you the track models and the intensity. Track models are pretty interesting. Track models want the system to move to the north-northeast, and then there's some runs that have it going in loop-de-loop. Some runs have it kind of still going on course. Some have it moving further to the east, but ultimately you're seeing a lot more of a consistent trend than what you were seeing previously, and that's something you're going to want to pay attention to. Intensity models. Never mind. Let's go ahead and pull those up. Yeah, intensity models. Majority of the models now want this to get up to hurricane strength. This is some new news for you guys right here. I'd say about 80% of the models now want this to get up to Category 1 strength, at least at some point in its life cycle. So of course we're going to have to watch that. Of course we're going to have to pay attention to that right now. But regardless of that, let's go ahead and show you the current information that we have. Maximum sustained winds are at 30 knots. Pressure's 1,007 millibars. Radius of maximum winds is 60 nautical miles. The remnants of Gordon officially dissipated. This could be a regeneration situation that we have right here. So I just figured I'd show you all these runs, all these models, just to kind of give you an idea of what we're looking at in terms of Gordon. Now, in terms of the threat for the Gulf of Mexico, in terms of the threat for the Caribbean Sea, in terms of the gyre system, let's go ahead and pull up all the information right there. Here's what we have in the Western Atlantic Ocean. Here's what we have pulled up for you. Okay, this is at 120 frames. Let's go ahead and move this back to 30 just to show you what we're looking at. Here's what we have going on right here. You're starting to see the gyre start to really ramp up. You're seeing a lot more convection really blowing up and really just getting out there, and we're going to have to pay attention to that right here, because ultimately what you're starting to notice is you're probably looking at this and you're probably going, hey Patrick, what are you looking at? Why are you looking at this isolated area of convection off the coast of Central America? What does this have to do with the tropics? This is your gyre setup right here, folks. That's your gyre setup. And I've said this before, and I will say this again. There have been several infamous cases of gyre setups just like this one right here, organizing and developing and causing some major impacts for those in the United States, Cuba, areas in the Caribbean, Mexico, all those areas as well. So remember, I talked about this. An infamous case was Hurricane Michael back in 2018. It organized off the gyre system right here, really blew up, got up to hurricane strength even before it entered the Gulf of Mexico, got up to Category 2 strength as it moved through the Yucatan Peninsula, ultimately made landfall as a Category 5 hurricane with winds of 160 miles per hour, and it made landfall in Mexico Beach, Florida, completely leveled the place, completely destroyed a lot of areas. In Panama City, Florida, Panama City Beach also got pretty badly hit, and it just ultimately was not a good system. And it also moved through the Florida Panhandle and entered Georgia as a major hurricane, and pretty much did a bunch of damage with that. A lot of people in southern Georgia never experienced a hurricane before, and a lot of their areas got destroyed by it. So that's a very infamous case right there with Hurricane Michael. Another case was a more recent case, actually, was Hurricane Idalia back in 2023. What Idalia ultimately did, it formed off the gyre just like this one did. It took its time to organize and develop, but by the time it entered the Gulf of Mexico, it was a 70-mile-per-hour tropical storm, intensified to a Category 4 hurricane, made landfall as a low-end 3 due to some dry air that got into the eye of the system, and caused quite a bit of damage for those in the Big Bend. We're going to have to pay attention to that. I just figured I'd bring those infamous cases up just to remind you, hey, you're going to want to watch this system, and like I said earlier in this video, the NHC is definitely going to want to tag this in the next day or two. Another thing we're paying attention to is you're seeing a lot more convection really starting to fire up. I believe the MJO is currently over this part of the Atlantic right now, and what you typically see with a classic MJO setup is you typically see a lot more convection firing up across a lot of these areas. Yep, you can see it right here. There's more convection firing up in Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, El Salvador, even the Eastern Pacific Ocean. You're seeing a lot more convection firing, as well as in parts of Venezuela too over here. That's the MJO really helps with that lifting mechanism right there, and we're going to have to pay attention to that. But ultimately, what you're looking at and what this MJO setup is going to do is it's going to help moisten up a lot of the atmosphere, as there is a little bit of dry air still present in parts of the Caribbean Sea. That's been pretty much fought back to a T2. Let's go ahead and go back to 120 frames. There's where the dry air was previously. Then last night you started seeing the gyre system really start to wake up, really start to ramp up in terms of convection and mix out a lot of this dry air. over here, and that's the main things you're going to want to pay attention to. The small stuff right now will add up eventually, and right now what I'm looking at is kind of the more small things to look at. What are the main things we're paying attention to in terms of the satellite? What are the conditions going to be? All those small ingredients are going to add up into one big thing eventually. That's how weather typically works. The small things add up, and if you can catch the small things early and look at all the data that you have, then it gives you a better forecast down the road. So that's what we're doing with this right here. Now I'm noticing there is a bit more dry air over here in this part of the Gulf of Mexico over here, which is definitely something the system is going to want to overcome if it wants to really blow up and enter the Gulf of Mexico, according to some of the GFS runs that have been really saying, oh my goodness, this thing's going to be a pretty huge system. It's going to need to overcome a lot of this stuff right here, and I'll get to the models in a little bit, but I just wanted to make that point very clear. But ultimately, you're seeing a much better environment for tropical development thanks to the gyre setup, and we're going to want to pay attention to it. I know I keep saying that phrase like a broken record in this video, but it really is. You're really going to want to keep an eye on this kind of stuff. You're going to want to take a look at this and say, okay, this is what we're looking at right now. What are the conditions and how can we prepare for them? Let's go ahead and show you the conditions right now. Let's go ahead and start with the water temperatures. For today, here's what we have going on. Where the system is right now, where the gyre is right now, it's in an area of about 30 degrees Celsius of water. That's a lot of warm water right there, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you living in the United States, that is 86 degrees Fahrenheit. That's more than enough for hurricane and tropical cyclone development. And it's also more than enough to allow for the water to evaporate and produce a lot of convection. You're seeing the MJO starting to work its magic. You're starting to see this system really start to get interesting, and you're seeing a lot more convection firing up with the gyre setup right there. All we need to look at for now is a bit of an area of broad rotation, and then boom, we'll have something for the NHC to take a look at. But ultimately, the concern I have right now isn't where it's at, but where it's going. And there's two possible scenarios that I am paying very close attention to. The first scenario, well, just before I get started, both scenarios actually do have the system entering a very conducive area of the Caribbean Sea. From then, what's the two main areas of concern are, will this enter the Gulf of Mexico and impact western Florida, as a bunch of the models have been forecasting, or will it make landfall in this part of Cuba, in the central part of Cuba, east of Havana, and move into the Bahamas and impact the eastern coast of Florida, as well as parts of the mid-Atlantic and southeastern United States, like the Carolinas, Georgia, maybe even as far up as Virginia. We'll have to pay attention to that. That's the main thing we're looking at. Both scenarios do go over water that is at least 31 degrees Celsius, 88 degrees Fahrenheit. And it goes over, both scenarios go over ocean heat content well over 175. There's a lot of areas that are breaking 200 OHC in these areas, where it's this huge blob of red is right here. This huge blob of crimson that we're paying attention to. So ultimately, that's what we're going to want to pay attention to. I'm trying to zoom in on this just to kind of give you a better look at it. But this area of this huge crimson red blob of OHC right here, this system's more than likely going to go into. And I want to make this very clear, because I know I beat this like a dead horse and I say this like a broken record, but those OHC values have not been really touched since Idalia of last year. They've stayed there. And yeah, Beryl did move through it, but it was moving too fast to really tap into that deep water right there. Let's go ahead and, matter of fact, let's go ahead and show you how deep this water is. Let's go ahead and show you how deep it is at 26 degrees Celsius. It's over 150 meters deep. That's about 500 feet for those of you who live in the United States. 500 feet is a lot of the way down. Just for context, that's how tall a lot of buildings are in St. Louis or in Chicago. Like, I know the Sears Tower is 108 stories tall or so. about half the size of the Sears Tower. It's about half this the height of the Empire State Building. Just for context right there. It's a little less than half for both cases, but I just wanted to make that perfectly clear. So that's how deep down this water goes, and I hope that gives you a scale as to how much we're looking at. So ultimately, it's going to be moving through this area right there. Another thing I'm pretty interested in taking a look at is all this OHC off the coast of Haiti and the Dominican Republic and the Central Caribbean Sea. I do find that area kind of interesting to watch. Not so in terms of this year. Of course, if a tropical system goes through there with low wind shear, it's absolutely going to explode in that OHC, but more so in the terms of next year, whether can this stay over here or not. And will this potentially be an impactor for next hurricane season? We'll have to pay attention to that. Wind shear values, let's go ahead and show you those. The Caribbean Sea is wind shear free, folks. It is, well, not in the traditional sense. It's wind shear free in the terms of it doesn't have very unfavorable conditions for wind shear. It has at the most about 15 knots of wind shear, and especially where this gyre is right now, some of this can be attributed to the convection and everything like that, but most it's in about an area of about 10 to 15 knots of wind shear. With that, coupled with the moist air, coupled with the warm water, this system has a very high ceiling. I've been talking to my guys about this on Storms United. They've agreed with me and said that this has a very high ceiling, especially in this area of the Caribbean Sea, where systems are notorious for rapid intensification and doing it at a very unexpected rate. So I wanted to make that very clear as we move on to the ensembles. Now, let's go ahead and show you the ensembles. We're going to show you the latest runs. Here's the 0Z GFS data for you right here for this morning. Let's go ahead and pull this up. The 0Z GFS data did shift this a bit more to the east, but look at all these lines right here. Look at the red, look at the pink, look at the hot pink as well. There's a lot more of these ensemble runs here. There's a lot more of these stronger ensemble runs than there were at this point yesterday. And that's definitely something you're going to I'm definitely concerned about. And that's your GFS ensembles. I'm going to go ahead and move the screen over. Actually, you guys can see it all right, but I'm going to move it a little bit over just to give you a better view. Look at those ensembles right there. Let's go ahead and show you the 12Z as well. 12Z is a bit more spread out, but look at how strong a lot of these ensemble runs are calling for right here. You're going to want to pay attention to this if you're in the Gulf of Mexico. You're going to want to pay attention to this if you're in Florida, in Cuba, in the southeastern United States. Let's go ahead and show you the European ensembles just for context. Here's the 0Z European runs. Majority of them do want them entering the Gulf of Mexico. 12Z from yesterday, it's definitely a bit of a downtrend right there, but because the ensembles are so spread out, the operational run's having a hard time indicating where the system's going to go and how strong it's going to get, and that's why it doesn't have it developing. So I wanted to make that perfectly clear, but several other runs are showing this developing. I wanted to go ahead and show you the GFS runs for the last few times, just to kind of give you some context and give you an idea of what this system wants to do. These are a bit outlandish, I will tell you that, because the 18Z GFS wants the system to stall out and then make landfall as a 959 millibar system. 0Z run wants the system further to the east. It does have it strengthening up to a major hurricane before making landfall in Cuba, has it making landfall as a major hurricane in Collier County, Florida, and then moving up the east coast and potentially bringing a lot of impacts to those areas as well. 6Z run, here's what we have pulled up for you right here. 6Z run has this system moving further to the west in the Gulf of Mexico, but having this system make landfall in the Florida Panhandle as a Category 3 hurricane. And then the 12Z run, let's go ahead and show you that. 12Z run, definitely a little bit weaker, but it has this still entering the Gulf of Mexico as a strong hurricane and moving through right there. All these scenarios want the system to intensify at a very rapid rate, according to the GFS. Let's go ahead and show you the Canadian run as well. 12Z Canadian run has the system doing a similar situation. 970 millibars as it makes landfall near the Big Bend. 0Z run, similar situation. The CMC has been very consistent with this, and that's pretty concerning to say the very least. I also want to pull up the Icon run just to kind of take a look at that. as well, just out of curiosity. Icon Run does want the system organizing, but further to the west, kind of like some of those Ensemble Run outliers are doing. But this is a situation you're going to want to pay attention to, and we will keep you updated here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. Be sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. It helps us out and helps us get more people engaged with weather. If you want to come hang out with us and talk tropics with us, be sure to join the Discord server, Storms United Discord server. A link to that is in the end screen. Also, shout out to Daniel as an official sponsor of the Pat's Path Predictor Patreon. If you want to come join and support me personally, be sure to join the Patreon. Link to that is in the first link in the description down below. It really helps get more videos out. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.